The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I've been looking at my Facebook feed and Twitter stream with great attention over the last couple of days, and there has been this interesting trend of people saying, hey, you know what? We're going to have to work together. We didn't want a President Trump, but we're going to have to work through our differences and find common ground. And it feels so disingenuous and ridiculous because we do have two Americas in the United States of America. There's no way about it. I've been talking about it for a long time. We have one America, and I'll describe both of them to you, and it might resonate with you or it might make you really angry and want to insult me because of my Judaism or origin of being born in Argentina, which is part of what tells us that we have these two Americas. That's something that would only strike some in this country as a reasonable way to attack what I'm going to tell you. We have one America where secularism, science, learning, and cultural sensitivity, openness to diversity of ideas and diversity of people has led to some of our greatest advancements on the backs of, not exclusively, but predominantly liberal ideas that would have been stifled if we had let conservatism reign. The 40-hour work week, weekends, Civil Rights Act, women's voting rights, national parks, the GI Bill, the FDA, Social Security, NASA, public universities, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Hoover Dam, Title IX, one currency for the entire country as opposed to a patchwork of currencies, the right to due process. These are all things that in some way, shape, or form were either partially or completely opposed by what we would consider the extreme sort of anti-government right. And then on the other hand, you have another America, which prides itself on being anti-intellectual, on living in this alternate reality where whoever is the current other is bad and to be feared and gone after and removed and neutralized however possible. These fantasy world ideas about how economies and societies can be run that have no correlation to reality whatsoever. And of course, often with no sense that mixing religion and government, and usually it's one religion and government, is bad. Work together. Find middle ground, respect each other's ideas. I'd love it if it were possible, but how is it? Because we have one country that has advanced so quickly since the Pilgrims made landfall, and another country in the United States of America that is constantly trying to keep things as if we were still in the 1620s at Plymouth Rock. So when I tell you now how progressives should work with Donald Trump, this is not some pie-in-the-sky kumbaya that we're all going to get together and have harmony. This is just a few ways in which progressives can maybe take advantage of some of the ideas that Donald Trump has gotten agreement on from Republicans that usually Republicans would be very much repelled by. So, for example, it would be best for progressives not to antagonize the low-information clowns that supported Donald Trump, which I'm doing right now by describing them as clowns, and try to avoid what we would call sort of identity politics. Let's criticize specific individuals for the things they say and their horrible ideas. I'm going to make the effort, Pat, although it's going to be really tough, not to slam the entire group of deplorables that voted for Donald Trump. I'm going to work up to that, hopefully, by the time Trump is inaugurated. I'm clearly having some trouble today. But from a pragmatic perspective, it would be best to at least pretend like maybe we could work with some of these people.
Well, even among our elected representatives, there's no incentive anymore to compromise. If you make a deal with the other party, the donor class is going to fund your primary challenger the next campaign. And the days of working together, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill working together to get effective policy passed, those are long over. And now what we're going to need to do is basically cherry pick as progressives areas where Trump has bamboozled his base into supporting ideas that Republicans generally don't like. So number one, the left should join the clueless Trump supporters, even though they barely understand what the hell is going on, in favoring Trump in terms of less intervention with Middle East dictators, right? That was an area where Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders were very, very similar.
progressives and low information Trump supporters who think that this is a right-wing idea should work together in trying to push Trump to make changes to trade agreements to the extent that it's possible, right? And a lot of what Trump has said he's going to do, he just won't be able to do, to try to help the American people. Stop the trillions of dollars of waste in the defense and military industrial complexes. Even if the Trump supporters like it only because Trump said it, because when Democrats say it, they don't like it, it's still useful to try to get them on board, to pressure Trump to actually do that stuff. The entire respect for the office is just not going to happen. Look at what Republicans did for 8 years of Obama. And as I posted to Twitter and Facebook earlier today, I am committing today to give Donald Trump the same support, respect, and admiration of the office that Republicans gave to President Obama for the last 8 years, because anything less, Pat, would be uncivilized. Unfortunately, it's a pretty damn low bar to set.
Right. I mean, his successes are the country's successes. So in terms of economic policy, foreign policy, we hope he does well.
Yeah.
On other things like social issues, honestly, I hope he fails.
This isn't about they did it, we will do it. It's about we will respect what there is that is worthy of respect. And there's a few ideas in there that could be good things for all. But beyond that, we've got two countries here, ladies and gentlemen. And the idea that we're just all going to come together now is absolutely ridiculous. How do the results of this presidential election reflect the will of the people, since more people voted for Hillary Clinton than for Donald Trump? And as the votes continue to be counted, we see that in 2016, like in the year 2000, the Democratic presidential candidate received more votes in the popular vote, but ultimately lost the electoral vote. This is a screenshot from the New York Times election tracker earlier today. And as you see, Hillary Clinton receiving about 230-ish thousand more votes than Donald Trump today. Donald Trump with more electoral votes than Hillary Clinton, but about 250,000 fewer votes overall. This is the system that gave us George W. Bush and Donald Trump, in spite of more votes for the other candidates, Al Gore and Hillary Clinton, respectively. And because of how the Electoral College works, it's actually possible mathematically for a candidate to win the White House with under 30% of the popular vote. Danielle Kurtzleben from NPR recently reported on this. We must abolish this ridiculous system. Now, right-wing nuts are going to email me, Pat, and they're going to say, David, you're saying that because Hillary lost the election and you just want to help Democrats. Well, no, that's why I'm reminding you about it today. But I've been saying this for years. I've been talking about it for nearly 20 years since I learned about this harebrained system in middle school. The Electoral College was established in 1787. And there's a couple reasons why it was established. One of which was to put the power of the election officially in the hands of electors, who I guess might be more trustworthy conceivably than a national popular vote, and sort of create these 51 mini elections. And another big part of it was when you take away the popular vote as the deciding barometer for elections, you take power away from population centers. Because if you have a national popular vote, candidates are going to go where there are more people. They're going to go to the big cities, and they're going to ignore more rural areas. The problem is that by instituting the electoral vote and setting up this primary system that we have, the two elements together have just created an opposite problem where the candidates rarely go to the population centers, and all of those who live in cities are by and large ignored. And instead, the candidates focus on arbitrarily important states like Nevada, New Hampshire, Iowa, Nevada, etc. So I understand the idea, Pat, but it's created the exact same problem just for a different group of people.
And it's now happened 4 times in American history that the winner of the electoral vote actually lost the popular vote, meaning that less people wanted them to become president.
Yeah.
But really, it's not a partisan issue. There's usually not much to do about it in Congress. So I don't see it changing anytime soon.
I don't either. And I'll talk to you about what would happen for it to change. But I also want to mention one other thing. I mentioned that this electoral college system was established in 1787. We didn't have media that allowed people all over the country to see their candidates if they didn't actually show up in their town. Maybe you would occasionally read about it in a newspaper. I am not less informed about my choice in the 2016 election because I didn't see the candidates speak in person. And that is something that we have to think about. Much of the system is more relevant. The explanation for the Electoral College system makes more sense when you can't just turn on your TV no matter where you are, or the radio, or the internet, or open a newspaper and see what it is that the candidates are doing or saying. Now, it's also not democratic at the state level because the Electoral College, with the exception of those 2 districts in Maine and the 2 or 3 districts in Nebraska, I forget exactly whether it's 2 or 3 there, people who don't vote the way that the majority in their state votes essentially are not represented in the results because it is winner take all at the state level. If we switch to a popular vote system, all of a sudden, every vote really does count. And this whole thing of, well, I'll vote third party because my vote won't make a difference because of the state that I'm in, that goes away, Pat, and every vote does count.
And people's votes should count equally across the country. But because of the Electoral College, people who live in small states and people who live in swing states actually have a more powerful vote than someone who lives in, say, California.
Absolutely. And this is yet another way in which our country is just really messed up, and it would be very difficult to change. The Electoral College is part of our Constitution. That means we need a constitutional amendment to change it. That requires a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate, and the ratification of 38 of the 50 states. A few efforts have been made to do this. In 34, a vote to abolish the Electoral College failed by 2 votes in the Senate. In 1979, the Senate debated a direct election alternative. That failed 51-48, shy of the 2/3 that it needed. And we've had this thing called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And the idea is get states to commit to supporting electorally whoever wins the popular vote. What this would allow states to do is, if you are in Indiana and Donald Trump wins Indiana, but Hillary Clinton wins the popular vote, Indiana might say, our electors will actually support the winner of the popular vote. Unfortunately, only 11 states combining for 165 electoral votes have sort of conditionally said that they would do this. And of course, this isn't the system that we have. Last thing on this. This is not some crazy unpopular idea. Back in 1948, Gallup surveyed people and asked them, do you want to get rid of the electoral vote system? 56% said, yeah, let's get rid of it. In 1967, that was up to 58%. And in 1968, that was up to 80%, and it didn't happen. If you have 80% support for something in a different era, and that's not enough to get change, Pat, it's going to be going nowhere fast, isn't it?
There's this turn now about moving against the elite, and this would be a prime example of how we have to move power back to the voters themselves.
No doubt about it. So we've got to get rid of that. We'll be talking about that more next week and coming up, although there are better ways. There are other ways we can also affect future elections. Hey, people have to vote. I mean, it sounds sort of obvious. I've been talking about it. I don't know how else I can say it. We are now learning about turnout in the 2016 election, and it is vile and disgusting. And yesterday we talked about the blame game that happens after elections. And I said, we can't blame the results on racism. Yeah, lots of racists voted for Donald Trump. Donald Trump catalyzed and coalesced the racist vote. But there could have been much stronger opposing forces if people had actually voted. Third parties, some people blaming third parties. Yeah, Gary Johnson got some votes. Jill Stein got some votes, even though much, much less than Gary Johnson. But by and large, the third party vote in 2016 helped Hillary Clinton not lose as badly to Donald Trump. Now, I mentioned yesterday, actually to blame, in part, is the selection by the Democratic National Committee in a completely biased and unfair primary process of Hillary Rodham Clinton, who was a flawed candidate and a candidate with significant liabilities. However, people have to vote. And I told you yesterday that we also have to blame the fact that voters didn't see this election as an emergency. This couldn't be a sort of, I don't like Trump, but I'm kind of busy on voting day. And, I don't really love Hillary Clinton and maybe I'll vote early, or I don't know, I might not actually get a chance to vote. This should have been red lights flashing, sirens blaring, emergency, stop everything and vote. But nearly half of eligible voters did not vote in this election. We now have some data from the early turnout rates. This was compiled by the United States Election Project. And if we look at early 2016 voting data, 46.6% of eligible voters did not vote. 25.6% of eligible voters voted for Hillary Clinton, and 25.5% of eligible voters voted for Donald Trump. And what that means is that basically a quarter of eligible voters decided that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. But here is the most sort of devastating part of this entire thing. Let's look at swing state voting data. More than a third of eligible swing state voters did not vote. Those that did, 29.9% of swing state voters voted for Hillary Clinton. 30.9% of swing state eligible voters voted for Donald Trump. They had, as Pat mentioned earlier in the show, because we have an electoral college system, swing state voters have disproportionate power relative to non-swing state voters. And really, this is the most horrible part. Historically, Republican turnout was down slightly. Democrats didn't show up. Let's put up the picture, Pat, of turnout in past elections in this one. If you look at Republican turnout, from 2008 to 2012, Republican turnout went up. But from 2012 to 2016, Republican turnout went down, meaning that if we had the same turnout as in 2008, nearly 70 million Democratic voters, or in 2012, nearly 66 million Democratic voters, Donald Trump could not stand a chance. But Democratic turnout was so much lower in 2016 that, yeah, we won the popular vote barely, not nearly enough to win the electoral vote. And corporate media, Pat, keeps saying, oh, the silent Trump majority came out and won it for Trump. Actually, the fact that Democrats didn't vote won it for Trump. 69 million votes for Obama in 2008. Hillary Clinton got 59 million votes. In 8 years, Democrats lost 10 million votes.
And as we speak, there are so many anti-Trump rallies going on around the country.
Yeah.
Places like Portland and Miami, major cities across the country. You'd have to hope that most of these people at least voted, right?
Yeah. I don't subscribe to if you didn't vote, you can't complain. But if you're now activating and you didn't vote, that's a real problem.
Right. I mean, the first way you can be politically active is to vote, right?
Yeah.
And you want to see how someone so unpopular like George W. Bush or Donald Trump can be elected president. That's how it happens.
And if ever that has been proven, it was in 2016, and it should be a lesson. By the way, should anyone at the DNC not be fired after what happened? I mean, we could blame them for the way they pre-selected Hillary Clinton. We can also blame them for the fact that they completely messed up their turnout game. And part of it is maybe people weren't excited about voting for Hillary Clinton. But I don't know that anybody at the DNC deserves to keep their job. Convince me otherwise. I'm on Twitter at @dpakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's more important than ever to support independent media after the results of the election on Tuesday. We'll be talking about that more later. Remember that if you shop on Amazon, davidpakman.com/Amazon helps to support the show. You can also become a David Pakman Show member. And today's new member of the day is James Kelty. James, thank you so much for being a member. You can join James at davidpakman.com/membership. Huge influx of members after the election. And for that, I thank everybody. You can also get a free 2017 David Pakman Show calendar at davidpakman.com/calendar17 with your membership. Reddit has exploded after the electoral college victory of Republican candidate Donald Trump, now president-elect. So much discussion on our Reddit discussion forum, now over 1,800 members. Please head over and subscribe. It's obviously free. Whether you participate or not, I would love for you to participate, but check out some of the discussions going on there. davidpakman.com/Reddit. Real quick, I want to go through a few of the topics that have come from our viewers over the last few days. After the election, we had a post about more crappy news. Nebraska votes to reinstate the death penalty. They must have a lot of money for appeals and axes to grind, pun intended, and a conversation happening on Reddit about the death penalty. Another post-election story on our Reddit discussion forum, not being mentioned enough today regarding Wisconsin and Michigan. Bernie Sanders beat Hillary Clinton head-to-head in the Democratic primaries in those states. He would have beaten Trump in those states and had a decent shot at winning the presidency. A lot of people wanting to have this conversation after Hillary Clinton's defeat in those states. also from our Reddit discussion forum. Dave, Ben, you called it, linking to an article from a French newspaper, Le Monde, which points out that, yes, indeed, there are those who are linking Gamergate to Donald Trump's victory via what we call the alt-right. And indeed, that is an interesting article which you can look at on our Reddit and translate from French to English. It happened, Gamergate, linked to the Trump victory. And one more, now that Mr. Word Randomizer won, and this is sort of a post on our Reddit discussion forum, that we need to be really concerned about the future of the United States after the Trump victory. And I won't read the entire post to you. I would love for you to go to davidpakman.com/Reddit and check it out yourself. But this is something that a lot of our viewers, Pat, are concerned by, which is what happens next? How bad is it going to get under Donald Trump? And I like that there's a place online where our viewers can get together and sort of discuss these issues.
And I think that question specifically asks what will happen to Hillary Clinton and if she may need to move outside of the country in fear of being put in prison.
Ending by saying we need to start storing food. It's funny. The food storage stuff is usually the hallmark of the religious right. And now after Trump wins, all of a sudden liberals are saying, are we going to need to start storing food? Maybe I do need to call Jim Baker and order 50 gallons of oats or something like that.
We may need to start selling our own bonus buckets.
Yeah, we're going to start having to really sell. I'm into the bulk mashed potatoes business. I think we're maybe instead of thinking of David Pakman Show coffee, we need David Pakman Show dehydrated spuds or something like that.
I mean, you don't have to wait for the apocalypse to eat them. I'm sure they're very good dried up in those buckets.
Yeah, you can start eating them right away. Hey, we didn't need to wait a year into Donald Trump's presidency or a month into Donald Trump's presidency. Just hours after becoming president-elect, Donald Trump has already gone against his campaign promise to be the outsider guy who's going to do something different in Washington. Donald Trump has brought in the same lobbyist influence peddlers that he ran against. Trump ran on, I'm going to break the Washington insider control. We're going to stop politics as usual. No Cruz, no Rubio, these insiders. No. I'm going to do something different. Actually saying our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by the American people. I think you know what's coming. Trump broke that promise within hours. I would love to hear from the Trump supporters who voted for Trump for something different. Let's look at the Trump transition team members. Put your seatbelts on, get your barf bags out, get the kids out of the room. Trump transition team members: Michael Catanzaro, lobbyist for Koch Industries and Disney. Eric Euland, a prior Goldman Sachs lobbyist, now working with the Trump transition team. William Palatucci, a lobbyist who has represented such nice mom and pop companies that represent America like Aetna and Verizon. Also rounding out the team, corporate lobbyists Rick Holt, Christine Ciccone, Rich Bagger, that's a fitting last name, and Mike Ferguson. Yeah, real change, huh? People criticizing Obama promised hope and change, and it was more of the same. Look at Donald Trump, bringing in the exact same types of people he said he would not bring in. And Trump for America Incorporated is a nonprofit chaired by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie that is overseeing the Trump transition. They're moving ahead. They're meeting with special interest groups. They're reaching out to lobbyists. And you know where they've been meeting? They've been meeting at the offices of notorious lobbying firm Baker Hostetler. They had a nice little breakfast. And who was there? Oh, you know, Ed Engel and Steve Hart, two lobbyists who have been working to promote the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's over, folks. Everything you voted for, change, anti-establishment, shake up Washington, it was a lie. It's the same old thing. It's Republican, crony, capitalist, plutocrats. How is this going to help? How is the Aetna lobbyist, how is the pro-TPP lobbyist going to help the little guy in Louisiana who voted for anti-Washington Trump to make America great again? This is the same type of team that led the Bush administration transition, that destroyed the economy. You've been bamboozled. Trump's decision to embrace lobbyists while denouncing them on the campaign trail should not surprise anyone who's been paying attention, but a lot of these trumpeters suspended their disbelief, or maybe they never had it to begin with, Pat, and it's over. Hours. We don't have to wait for the inauguration. We don't have to wait for the cabinet. Trump is doing the exact thing he said he wouldn't. The supporters have been bamboozled.
You got to love how Chris Christie is in charge of his transition team when two of his own cabinet members in New Jersey were convicted for closing down a bridge and trying to get back political retribution. It's just so fitting.
The entire thing is a sham. His supporters voted for A, and he has already announced the opposite of A. So much for voting for the outsider. And this is worse than what Trump accused Hillary Clinton of. Enjoy it, folks. Glad those poor rural whites in Mississippi chose Trump, huh? Now lobbying firm Baker Hostetler and their continental breakfast meetings with Aetna lobbyists and Verizon, they're really going to make America work again for that poor white dude in Mississippi who wants change and make America great again. It is unbelievable. It is disgusting. And it is completely unsurprising in every way. Something very interesting is happening. I've been crowing to anyone who would listen for years, but especially for the last few months, that we're at the apex of needing independent media. Corporate media has failed systematically, ideologically, and dramatically. Corporate media was complicit in the DNC's handing of the Democratic nomination to Bernie Sanders. Corporate media didn't talk about Bernie until there was no way to avoid it. They resisted until the last possible day. But then eventually they just had to talk about Bernie. Corporate media's reports on the horse race are done in a way that conforms to very narrow parameters in terms of what is okay to discuss in these conversations. And I came to the audience when Trump won, even on election night, and I said, it's so important right now to support independent media. And I am so heartened that membership has exploded over the last 48 hours. I offered this 40% off deal, which, by the way, if you want, email me and I'll send you the code. We're offering free David Pakman Show calendars at davidpakman.com/calendar17. I don't know what the reason is, but it is exploding. Very special thanks to Nicholas Hillpipra, who signed up at the highest level today of $480 a year, our highest level membership. I am truly flattered, okay? But it is fascinating to me that now, all of a sudden, there are some notable major articles coming out worldwide about, hey, you know what? We need independent media. I'm waving my arms like a madman the entire election saying corporate media has failed us. We need independent media, especially when it's Trump or Clinton for different reasons that we've talked about. Crickets. And now The Guardian publishes an article called "In This New World, Now is the Time to Support Fearless Independent Journalism." Oh, now is the time? The time wasn't when we were talking about Bernie and corporate media didn't mention him until they had no choice in spite of his surge. The last year was the time for that kind of journalism, and every single corporate media outlet failed the people. And I thank our supporters, but lots of people didn't understand the importance. Now, the headline is right from The Guardian, but I want to look at one quote from the article and talk about what they say here. This is an article by Lee Glendinning, that is, in The Guardian. Never has the world needed independent journalism more. Through our reporting, The Guardian will hold Trump and his administration to account. We will strive to uncover the truth of those if those in power hide behind falsehoods. We will continue to sort fact from fiction. When underrepresented experiences are ignored, we will find ways to make sure they are heard. Now is the time to support journalism that is both fearless and free, which is why I am writing today to ask you to fund our work by becoming a Guardian supporter. I think what is being missed here, aside from whether you consider The Guardian independent media or corporate media, doesn't really matter. The point is not about just holding Trump accountable. That's important. But the point is about laying the path for the future. And we can't wait until August of 2020 to start laying the path. On Monday, I will come to you with specific elections you can get involved with now for 2018, and we will continue laying out the path that we laid out yesterday, 2018, 2020, 2022, redistricting, the 2020 census. We have to think ahead in a real way, and I'm going to be doing it. We're going to be working on it, but we do need your support. I hope that this experience, for me, it has opened up my eyes to see what is necessary. If you're paying $120 a month for cable TV, is another $5 a month for a year of the David Pakman Show membership going to be something that doesn't make any sense if you're paying $120 for cable TV? If that's too much, use the code HATREAT40 and get 40% off. If you'd rather get a free calendar, I'll send you a free calendar if you sign up at davidpakman.com/calendar17. But Pat, you should see my email inbox dinging constantly from new members and emails from people saying, I realize that corporate media effed us.
People are realizing that now. Yeah. If CNN and the other corporate media networks didn't give Trump $2 billion worth of free advertising
or
and
$3 billion.
Legitimize him.
Potentially $3 billion in free advertising for Trump and not a mention of Bernie until they just couldn't. They waited until they were going to be red in the face from the fact that they were ignoring Bernie Sanders. I really am glad. I know that there's a lot of emotional stuff going on. I'm so glad about the fact that a lot of people have come to me and they said, I'm supporting your show now. I understand the path forward. I understand we need to start working now. Please do the same at davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
A whole bunch of people have emailed me saying, David, you've got to get a look at this contract with the American voter that Donald Trump has released for his first 100-day action plan. I want to look at a few pieces of it because it is absolutely insane. We're going to look just at some of it. It's a 2-page document. We're linking to it on our YouTube channel, and you can check it out. Let's start with Donald Trump's 6 measures to clean up Washington, D.C., and I'll show you just how insane this is. So we're focusing in on this piece of this 2-page document. All right, let's go through it one by one. Number 1, Trump in his first 100 days will propose a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on all members of Congress. I actually agree with that, but note the wording, he will propose one, it will not happen. Second, a hiring freeze on federal employees to reduce the federal workforce through attrition. This likely won't happen once somebody explains to Trump how things work in the real world. Remember that government jobs have already declined under President Obama, and this is sort of an irrelevant dog whistle. Number 3 in Trump's action plan, a requirement that for every new federal regulation, 2 existing regulations must be eliminated. This is impossible. I mean, this is just not how government works. You'll notice the term requirement is there. Legally, requirement is a very, very vague term. Is that an executive order? Is that a bill? What is a requirement? And when you're passing new regulations or new laws, there's really no legal way to make requirements to eliminate unrelated regulations. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Number 4, Donald Trump promises in his first 100 days a 5-year ban on White House and congressional officials becoming lobbyists after they leave government service. That I actually like. I think that would be great. I don't know that that's actually going to happen, but it would be a really, really great thing. Number 5, a lifetime ban on White House officials lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. That I actually like also. I just don't think Trump's going to be able to get it done. And 6th, a complete ban on foreign lobbyists raising money for American elections. Very difficult to implement, especially given campaign finance law and Citizens United. I sort of like the idea of the proposal, but with Citizens United and so much of what we now have in place for campaign finance, you can't possibly do that.
And even though both houses of Congress will be on Donald Trump's side, Republican Party in both sides of of Congress, why would they vote to limit their own power? It just doesn't make any sense.
It's very hard to get people who had a system get them into power want to change the system that got them into power. Let's take a look at just a little bit more of this. This is from Trump's End Illegal Immigration Act. Now we're really getting into the meat of it. This, according to Trump, will fully fund the construction of a wall on our southern border with the full understanding that the country of Mexico will be reimbursing the United States for the cost of the wall. Not happening. Mexico said it's not happening. There's no legal mechanism to ensure that that's going to happen. Mexico is not paying for the wall. It will also establish a 2-year mandatory minimum federal prison sentence for illegally re-entering the U.S. after a deportation, a 5-year minimum federal prison sentence for illegally re-entering for those with felony convictions, and also it will make it that open jobs must be offered to American workers first. So Mexico's not refunding anything. It's very clear. some of these additional sentences that Trump is promising, criminal sentences, could be passed. I don't know if it could be done within 100 days. And this whole thing of jobs must be offered to American workers first. For the most part, that's what the law already says. If you want to hire someone from another country and bring them in and give them legal status, you actually have to go through a pretty rigorous process of proving that you've really looked for people in the U.S. and didn't find anybody. It's called it's something like an extraordinary ability mechanism. And I know some people who have come to the U.S. under that. But this idea of the whole offering of jobs, I just think this is so pie in the sky, Pat. It is so unrealistic. And when you look at the wording, you realize that much of this means nothing. It's not even a specific proposal.
And this comes from a guy who had illegal immigrants from Poland working in his building. So he's the last person to make this case.
These are mostly dog whistles and meaningless red meat. And it's a 2-page document. Take a look at it. One provision is funnier than the last. And it really makes for some nice reading. If you were going to, I don't know, look at some comic books or something, this would be something equivalent because it is just so insane. And believe me, we will be covering whether the promises are kept, already breaking the promise of being a Washington outsider. As I told you earlier in the show, hiring the usual suspects, lobbying firms, to handle the Trump transition. Okay, as I told you earlier, Donald Trump is bringing in the normal, horrible, depraved lobbyists that he criticized during his campaign and said that he would not bring in. Here's the stunner, though. Sarah Palin is being considered to be part of Donald Trump's cabinet. This is the same Sarah Palin. It's hard to even get through the story because it's so insane. The same Sarah Palin that is at least partially responsible for bringing down John McCain's bid for the presidency might be in Donald Trump's cabinet. A person who spoke to the Trump campaign told Politico that aides are considering Sarah Palin for Interior Secretary. Trump has said he would consider a cabinet position for Sarah Palin. Palin has not made it a secret that she is interested in that. Sarah Palin, Pat, I mean, this is you can't parody this on Saturday Night Live because it's the real world.
And Sarah Palin has become another reality TV show star, just like Trump was. So it's really fitting. And even Omarosa Manigault from The Apprentice.
Oh, yeah, you got to bring in Omarosa because she's really going to be able to, I mean, who knows what it is she's going to do. Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., is said to be also interested in the job of Interior Secretary. Trump's son. I would love a competition of some kind between Sarah Palin and Don Jr. Maybe the challenge would be they have to get ingredients with food stamps and make the best meal for Wolfgang Puck or something like that. I mean, make it all a reality show, right?
Well, I thought Donald Jr. was going to be in charge of running Trump's businesses. So you have to see how that blind trust in the Trump organization is working out.
Yes, a very, very good question. Secretary of State possibilities. Newt Gingrich is a possibility. Yeah, that's disturbing. Also, our favorite former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, who didn't even think the United Nations should exist, John Bolton, a possibility for Secretary of State. This is a clown car, ladies and gentlemen. Attorney General. I can't believe that we're having this conversation, but people close to Trump say that former New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, one of Trump's strongest public defenders, is the leading candidate to be the Attorney General of the United States. I don't know what to say, Pat.
Maybe then he'll be privy to government secrets and actually know FBI agents who are currently in the government agency.
Even worse, Commerce Secretary. Trump is said to be considering former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who once officially conducted a rain dance to try to ease the drought in Texas. Maybe the Commerce Secretary. Also, Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee being considered as Commerce Secretary. Health and Human Services Secretary, some of the names receiving buzz. I know you're going to think I'm kidding, but this is all real. Florida Governor Rick Scott, Newt Gingrich also being considered there, and Ben Carson, possibly the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And this is where it really gets ugly, Pat. Homeland Security Secretary. I'm having trouble even talking about this because it is so disgusting. Remember that crazy conservative sheriff from Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, David Clark, who's completely off his rocker? I mean, we're talking about one of the most unhinged law enforcement individuals I've maybe ever seen in the United States of America, reportedly being considered as Homeland Security Secretary. Yeah, I just don't know what to say. Do you see what is going on here, ladies and gentlemen? This is a joke. This will be a circus clown car cabinet. This makes George W. Bush's cabinets look like the brain trust of political history by which all others should be judged. This is part of the anti-intellectual movement that I've been telling you about. To save the country, we've got our work cut out for ourselves. That's for sure. Let's take a break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I've talked on the show before about incidents of anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic bias that I've experienced. I told the story of once when I was working at Circuit City, when the now defunct electronics chain, a coworker of mine came over and said, "Oh man, these customers I was just dealing with, they were just so Jewish." Of course, my ears perk up right away, and I say, "What do you mean? What do you mean that they were so Jewish?" They were trying to Jew me down on the prices, and they were just so difficult to work with. And I said, "Oh, I'm actually Jewish." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that in front of you then." That is one of the incidents that really stands out in my mind, and I've got probably a dozen or more of these incidents I've been involved with. And the good thing is that to some degree, and maybe this is because of the people I surround myself with, I've experienced fewer of these incidents over time, and I'd like to think that at least in part, it's not necessarily because these beliefs don't exist anymore. Recent surveys we've talked about show that they do exist, but because people at least have more shame about openly expressing them. There's a recent report from the Anti-Defamation League called Anti-Semitic Targeting of Journalists during the 2016 presidential campaign. And what we saw because of the Donald Trump campaign is a really, really disgusting and wretched resurgence, not necessarily of anti-Semitic beliefs, because those have been around for a very long time, but of the willingness to publicly express that anti-Semitism. One of the most targeted Jewish journalists by those associated loosely as Trump supporters has been Ben Shapiro, who's actually a conservative who was not particularly warm on Donald Trump. He was heavily targeted by anti-Semitic tweets and images and memes and attacks on the internet. And we also talked about the campaign of Trump itself, tweeting this image of Hillary Clinton next to a Star of David with a whole bunch of money, a pile of money in the background, all of this stuff. You need to be prepared for the reality that on display, public anti-Semitism is going to have a significant resurgence under President Donald Trump. We saw an incident, in fact, yesterday morning, anti-Semitic graffiti and a swastika and the words Sig Heil 2016 were on a storefront glass window in South Philadelphia. This is, from what I understand, a Jewish-owned business. And the reality is that this is going to be more and more prevalent. These views have been emboldened. Consider the alt-right. We actually, good opportunity to preview this. We have a really good video about this movement called the alt-right, which was in great part responsible for the rise of Donald Trump. We've got a long-form video about the alt-right coming soon, which is a movement that is highly anti-Semitic and highly supportive of Donald Trump. And remember, Jews are the #1 victims of religious hate crimes in the United States, and it is about to get much worse. I've been speaking to people from different Jewish community groups. I've been speaking to people from the Anti-Defamation League, and this is ramping up. They are ramping up preparedness, security, resources. This is a real problem, right? This is not one of these, I wonder what might happen. We've seen what will happen under the rhetoric of a Donald Trump during the campaign. We've seen, remember that article, I forget what magazine it was in, but Melania Trump was interviewed in a magazine. I don't remember if it was Vanity Fair or Esquire. I apologize, I don't remember the article. And shortly after that, the author of that article, who happens to be Jewish, although that was not a relevant part of the content of the article, was slammed and attacked all over the internet because they were Jewish with anti-Semitic tirades, diatribes, and epithets. And prepare yourselves. This is happening. This is real. And Pat, it's probably not the only group. A lot of groups are going to be sort of fair game for targeting now under the Trump administration, Jews just one of the ones that have been most visibly targeted already, but a lot of groups need to be ready.
We've heard mostly about how Muslims will be treated under a Trump administration because at one point he argued that a whole group of people based on their religion should not be allowed in the country, which is completely antithetical to the United States values, our Constitution. We haven't heard as much about how Judaism will be treated, but now that the alt-right's voice has kind of been legitimized with his election, we'll have to see.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's going to get ugly, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, overwhelmingly Jews voting for Hillary Clinton, not for Donald Trump. Okay, listen, it's been pretty dark here because of the election results and because of a lot of what we're going to be dealing with in the United States over the next 4 years. Let's transition to talking about, instead of dark politics, dark roasts. We are ready now to have your help naming the David Pakman Show coffee blends. I've mentioned this a couple of times. We're going to have 2 coffee blends, okay? One will be for drip coffee. So if you have like a regular coffee machine or a French press or a Chemex or any of the machines where just a regular coffee machine, we will have one David Pakman Show coffee roast for drip coffee machines. For those of you like me who are more into espresso, we are going to also have an espresso roast David Pakman Show coffee option. I now am going to present to you the finalists for the names for these 2 roasts, and then I'll tell you what the next step is, okay? I don't know yet. I'm just taking names, and then we'll figure out which one will be espresso, which one will be drip coffee. Some will be more obvious because of the names. The voting poll is up at davidpakman.com, okay? So let's take a look at the options for our coffee roasts. Here's one that I kind of like. It's simple, but I like it. Instead of the David Pakman Show, the David Pakman Joe, of course, Joe, a nickname for coffee. The David Pakman Joe, progressively percolated. Any number of beans, referring to this phrase that I, at one point, not consciously overused, and now I overuse just as a goof, any number of beans. Freedom of the press. Free speech still drips. I like that. This one's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I do like it. Shill espresso. This is referring, of course, to me being a shill for all sorts of different stuff. I'm a Hillary shill. I'm a Zionist shill. I'm a social justice warrior shill. Who knows what I'm shilling for these days? But in any case, shill espresso. Progressive wake-up call. And lastly, Patriot repellent. Vote. Okay, davidpakman.com. If you scroll down on the right side of the website, you will see the poll, and you can select 2 options because we are going to have 2 roasts. You can select your favorite 2 options, and while you're there, the David Pakman Show shop is back up. T-shirts, hoodies, bumper stickers, sweatshirts, all that stuff is available. Of course, the calendar as well. You go to davidpakman.com and you click the shop button at the top and get your calendars as well. So the process, Pat, is we have opened the poll up. Once we have our winners, I will come back, announce them, and then we are also going to source the label designs from the audience. Once we have the names, I love when the audience is involved in designing stuff that we do. We will actually take label designs from the audience for the custom labels that will go on the coffee. I think this is a great thing to distract a little bit from the disaster that is the state of American politics right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you can vote for 2, but are we going with the popular vote here?
No, we're going electoral. Yeah, I don't know what the hell that means when it comes to voting for coffee, but you know what? We are going to be electorally selecting the results, which I guess just means Pat decides. Once we get the vote in, we ignore the vote and Pat just decides what he wants, right? Is that the closest thing to the electoral coffee vote?
This isn't a democracy here at the show. It's a dictatorship.
But yes, please vote, davidpakman.com. Name that coffee. I know a lot of people looking forward to this. Coffee is a big deal. I didn't realize that a lot of people drink coffee, Pat. You know, Dunkin' Donuts every half block in Boston didn't relay to me that a lot of people drink coffee, but they do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly averaging about 2 to 3 cups a day, so I'm certainly on the caffeine train.
We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Now, this is a voicemail. It's very, very nice. It's a sort of a positive message in light of the election, but it's also really funny, I think, unintentionally. Take a listen to this.
Hi, David. We could care less whether you're gay or not, and we don't think you are.
Okay.
But you are extremely brilliant, and a lot of those rednecks that you get those Patriot meals from are ignorant, stupid, and they're rednecks.
Okay.
You know, and Keep going on, David. You're really helping us. And we have one boy in college, another daughter that's going to be going to college in another year or so. We have 2 younger children. We let them stay up to, the younger ones, stay up to watch your program, and they're learning a lot from you.
Thank you.
And we thank you very much. God bless you, David. And keep on trucking, sweetie. Bye-bye.
Thank you. What a voicemail, Pat. What a voicemail. A few notes. Number 1, could care less shows up again. Couldn't care less was what she meant, but it was very, very sweet message no matter what. I like that whether I'm gay or not, she still likes the show. That's cool. I mean, that's nice.
Right. It was a fantastic voicemail, but she seems like you're actually distraught over what the Hatriots are saying about you.
Yeah.
I don't think it really phases you that much.
No, and she became, it sounded like a little bit emotional there, and I really appreciate that. But I'm okay with the Hatriot mails. It's okay. And also, to the untrained ear, that might sound like a Boston accent. That is a Rhode Island accent. Really? I don't know if it's called Providence accent or a Rhode Island accent, but there's parts of Providence that have a Boston-ish accent, and it is a little different, Pat.
See, I'm so used to hearing it around here that I didn't notice that she had a dialect in any state.
You didn't recognize?
I didn't recognize it. No.
Wow. Now I believe that our audience that is not from this area, they would hear that and they would immediately say that is a very noticeable accent. But because you grew up here, you don't even hear it.
It doesn't even faze me. No.
Amazing. Amazing what we've learned today. All right, on the bonus show today, anti-Trump protest rage. We will talk about that. We will talk about rumors that President Obama will be pushing for the Trans-Pacific Partnership before leaving office. And what are you doing to take care of yourself after this abortive election? All of those stories and more on the bonus show. Sign up and get instant access. Why wait? It's instant access at davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.